I was born the 6th of April 1922, Wagga Wagga, New South Wales, the child of an older sister and a younger brother. We were a farming family with an 800-acre farm. In 1929 the family moved to a 1,000-acre farm about 19 miles south of Narrabeen in WA. I went to a one-teacher school about half a mile across the paddock from the house. I left school at 40 to help on the farm, so my formal education was finished at primary level. In my teens, I remember at the local bike club, my bike was the local baker's delivery bike with a big basket over the front wheel to carry the bread. The bike was a modified and enabled me to win a 15-mile road round Narrabeen one year. I listed in the RAAF in the 30th of October 1941 as a trainee Group 5 for the duration of the war, plus 1 year thereafter. My mustering was to be trained as an aircraft electrician, which involved a sea voyage to Adelaide to number 1 service training school, STCS, and then on to number 4 STCS in Melbourne. This school was at the modern technical college, and our accommodation was the old exhibition buildings. We were accommodated on the first and second mezzanine floor. This consisted of a shearer's wire bed, mattress, a hessian bag filled with straw. 3 blankets were supplied, but no sheets or pillowcases. Each bed was separated by a foot locker, and I remember the weather being extremely cold. The food was basic and wholesome. Tinned meat and vegetables, bully beef, margarine like candle wax, tinned Kraft cheese, reconditioned mashed potatoes and powdered eggs. If the powdered eggs were served with sugar, it was called custard, and if it was served with salt, it was called scrambled eggs. It was pretty much standard wartime military food, as people would comment. If this war's to last only a short while, with this food, it is going to seem like eternity. The pay for AC1 was 6 and 6 a day, 65 cents, or £2, 5 and 6 for a 7-day week. On graduation, I was sent to number 4 Service Flying Training School at 4SFTS Geraldton. In July 1942 as an aircraft electrician. Our farm tractor was magneto ignition. I was mainly involved in aircraft magnetos and ignitions. In March 1943, I was transferred to number 1 Wireless Air Gunner School, number 1 WAGS, and then a month later transferred to 5 Aircraft Depot 5AD in Wagga Wagga. This depot stored and serviced aircraft before being issued to flying schools and squadron. I was accepted for aircrew training and sent to 5 initial training schools at 5 ITS based at Clontarf Orphanage. This school was for all types of aircrew, pilots, navigators, bomb maintenance and wireless operator air gunners. About 123 recruits started training. This was November 1943 and we were number 48 corps. We lived in 6-man stints. Lighting was single hurricane lamp on the centre pole. Subjects studied were King's regulations, maths, trigonometry, principles of flight, Morse code and Morse code with an oldest lamp and basic navigation. Hours were spent on the parade ground, marching and practising ceremonial drill and with a 303 rifle. On nights we were allowed to off base. We would run to about 5 miles to Raffles Hotel at Canning Bridge, and after the session back to the Clontarf. We were very fit at this stage. Part of the reason for our fitness was due to the rule that if you were in the outside building during the day and the siren rang, you would run to your destination. This happened randomly many times during the day. We had a graduation dinner of 48 course. There were 109 of us at this stage, and of which 69 eventually went to number 9 Elementary Flying Training School, number 9 EFTS at Canada in March 1944. The remainder went over to East for training as navigators, bomb aimers and wireless operator air gunners. At Canada we were accommodated in a wooden asbestos clad building, a hut with tin roof. This was the top of the hill where the current agricultural college is, and there were 4 billman hangars down on the flat next to the Moortrock River. The airfield was all over grass at the time. Flying train for me started 17th of April 1944 and involved introductory flight with Flight Officer Williams as my instructor. By the end of the week I had 8 hours 40 minutes dual and was sent solo on Anzac Day for 15 minutes. Flying training continued on a regular basis. I passed the flying test on 19 hours in 1944. I completed the initial flying course 80 hours on flying time. One weekend I was granted leave to go home to Narrabeen. I was able to borrow a motorbike from my mate. Due to a convoy of army trucks travelling from Kalgoorlie down to, it was fairly cold. I was dressed in my flying suit, boots and helmet and goggles. I was a bit unsure of my position and saw a farmer ploughing during the night, during the field, stopped to ask the way. Unfortunately there was a rumour around that there was a crashed Japanese pilot wandering around the district. There was always these rumours. When I stepped in front of the tractor in the headlights, because of my short nature, the farmer took me for the said Jap and pulled a rifle on me. My use of language in Australian and accent, I survived. After Canada, we went to 4 SFTS at Geraldton to twin training. By this stage, the numbers had been reduced to 20. The Geraldton we were again accommodated in typical Air Force accommodation huts. Trainees were near the parade ground. My first flight during dual was the 6th of July 1944 with Flight Officer Forbes for about an hour, 30 minutes and corrected items 1 to 12 of the syllabus. I went solo in the Anson on the 11th of July 1944 and by the 13th of September 1944 with a grand total of 160 hours 30 minutes, passing the intermediate flight. Training continued on for the advanced stage of the course, but for March on the solo flying, we now flew with a crash mate. The person was a member, another trainee. It was a navigation exercise. The trainee would be the navigator and the first stage, and the other was the pilot. For the second return journey, the roles would be reversed. It was difficult to get lost on the navigation exercise on a fine day due to the fairly tall hill north of Geraldton, which was visible for about 50 miles. My crash mate was Bob Cooper, also known as the Führer, because he gave the impression of Adolf Hitler. Yeah, so the end of 1944, the officers' mess were to arrange a dining-in night at the Kojarina satellite airfield. Early on the Saturday morning, the trainees and instructors jumped in 12 Ansons and flew the 20 miles to Kojarina. At stand down, everybody spruced up well and went to the mess, roast pork and turkey and with all the trimming. Unfortunately, about 8 p.m, the beer ran out and the CO, Group Captain Dixie Chapman, flew the Tiger Moth to get another keg. The Group Captain returned about 45 minutes later with a full keg strapped to the front seat. The movement continued for many trainees calling for Herbert during the night. The contingent flew gently back to Geraldton the next morning. Flying continued into December 1944, and I did my wings test with Wing Commander Ball the 5th of December 1944. The last flight at Geraldton was the 11th of December 1944. As you can see, a grand total of 260 hours, 40 minutes, with time reaching the required standard. Our graduation parade took place on the 15th of December 1944. Others who graduated of this course were Bob Cooper, already mentioned, who went on to train a crop dusting business in Geraldton.
Steve Adams,
who went on to instruct at the Royal Aero Club of WA and also to the crop dusting pilot, and George Meadows, who joined MAA after the war and became an F-28 captain. We were the last course to graduate from Geraldton. Number 4 SFTS started closing down the day after our graduation. Number 49 course was transferred to Malala to complete their training. After graduation, we were made up to sergeant and 4 were commissioned as pilot officers. We were granted leave over the Christmas and January to 1945, reported to Perth Railway Station for the train transport to Victoria for other courses. Our train was parked in the siding west of the main station opposite the Rose Street House of Ill Repute. About 4:30 p.m. on the whistle blew and we were off. 2 of the girls from the brothels waved to us by removing their blouses and drawers to wave to their heads. Must have been a good flight. I suppose it was a good for our morale. Travel across the Nullarbor was either by cattle truck or dog box carriages. I was always lucky to travel in a dog box carriage. There were 5 of us to the compartment, and for sleeping, 2 slept on the seats and 2 slept on the luggage rack, and I was being small, slept on the floor. Cookhouses were attached to the train, and 3 times a day the train stopped and for meals. We were mainly fed meat and veg with looked like it had been recycled. Fully baked hardship biscuits. The meal was eaten sitting on the rails. After 5 days we arrived in Melbourne. On a cold and frosty morning, the temperature reminded me of my previous times in Melbourne during the aircraft electrician's course. We were sent to Watsoni at Melbourne suburb for the aircrew officers NCO's school, including unarmed combat and 15-mile forced marches. We also studied some astronavigation. After this course we transferred to Malala, about 60 miles north of Adelaide, for advanced training, mainly instrument flying. Also at the school I was converted to the airspeed officers, a similar aircraft to the Anson. It was a bit tricky to handle, but the advantage, the undercarriage was hydraulic, I think. In March 1945, on occasion, a cross-country flight with Sergeant Cummins, we had a rough running engine. I made an emergency landing in a rough short field near Owen, which was about 10 miles north of Adelaide, Malala. The ground crew came out from Malala and adjusted the magnetos on the rough running engine, and we completed the rest of the course. June 1945, I completed the course on altitude flying and managed to survive up to
13,000 feet
in the test chamber without oxygen. I must admit I was struggling and breathing at the time. In July 1945, I transferred to number 35 Transport Squadron with a grand total of 395 hours, 10 minutes, to be trained as C-47 military DC-3 second pilot. 35 Transport Squadron was set up in the Fliers, WA, with a variety of transport aircraft and was eventually equipped with C-47 aircraft, and by the time I joined them they were based Garbutt, Townsville in Queensland. After the war finished in August 1945, the squadron was tasked with flying soldiers and ex-POWs home after the support the movement of 81 Wing to Iwakuni in Japan as part of the British Commonwealth Air Force and Occupation Force under the command of Air Vice Marshal Sir Cecil Boucher, RAAF. Looking at my logbook, I see my initial flights were up and down the east coast of between Townsville and Archipel, Brisbane. In August 1945, I started flying second pilot between Townsville, Higginsfield, Merauke on day 1 and day 2, Merauke, Biak, Morotai. You'll see from the following map of Dutch New Guinea, the mountain peaks in the Carpenter's Toppen area circled have 10 peaks greater than 16,000 feet, with the highest being 16,500 feet. There are still aircraft from the war missing in the area that have still not been found. We used to fly along the coast to the Neck and then to Biak. The journey took 4 days return, involving about 13 and a half hours flying. The only solo flying I was able to do was to fly the Squadron Tiger Moth to Bredon Airfield and Charters Towers, taking about an hour and a half each way. This was to transport magnetos to number 7 aircraft maintenance repair. So on one flight, during some low level flying along the Ross River, I came across nurses from the nearby military hospital swimming in their bathing suits without bathers. I was lucky not to crash in the river. In early 1946, I was second pilot flying from Morotai to Labuan in Borneo and on to Clarkfield in the Philippines, and then on to Naha, Okinawa, and finally both the Konoya and in Japan in support of the transfer of 81 Wing to the occupation of Air Force in Japan. Our regular trip between Garbutt and Morotai was via Cloncurry, Darwin and Ambon. This, I think, was due to the peace having been declared and the Japanese at the islands between Perth and North Darwin having surrendered and not shooting at us. On the 10th of April 1946, I was transferred to number 6 Transport Squadron and to the demanding number 35 Transport Squadron. The slide shows the end of April 1946. I had a grand total of 780 hours, 18 minutes. By this time I was based at Morotai and flying the Morotai Japan leg of the courier flights to support 81 Wing. This was the Philippines in Okinawa and Japan. Iwakuni was about 450 miles from Tokyo on Honshu Island. It's between the nuclear-bombed cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and it was mentioned either the headquarters of the British Commonwealth Air Force in Japan. In Morotai we lived in tents.
I'll take over. For making tea or coffee, we used a chufa stove. This stove consisted of a crashed aircraft's oxygen bottle hung in a tree about head height and fitted with a valve and a length of tubing running into the fireplace. In the fireplace, the tube was coiled, a small hole was drilled near the end of the tube and the end of the tubing squashed to seal it. The bombs used to have a steel frame fitted over the tail fins to protect them in transport. These made an ideal frame for the stove. To use the stove, the tank was filled with aviation fuel and the valve was opened to allow fuel to run into the fireplace. A lit match was thrown in from a safe distance. The fuel would ignite with a bit of a bang and after a short while the fuel would vaporise and the pressure built up in the line, stopping the fuel from flowing. The fire would die down. This would stop vaporisation, allowing the fuel to flow again, and the cycle would repeat itself. The sound sounded like a steam engine pulling out of the station. Shoof, 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 hence the name. We were also given a ration of 2 bottles of beer every so often. When all the contents were consumed, the empties were taken down to the beach and they'd float away on the high tide, never to be seen again. My last flight in the RAAF was on the 2nd of August 1946, flying from Morotai to Darwin. I would have been due for discharge in September 1946, but was diagnosed with TB and sent back to Perth and admitted to Hollywood Repatriation Hospital. The cure for TB in those days was complete bed rest and pressurising the chest cavity with low pressure air to reduce the workload on the lungs so they would rest, allowing them to heal. The device consisted of 2 bottles, one filled with water and the other with air at room pressure. A rubber tube with a valve and I think a 1/8 needle was connected to the air bottle. The needle was pressed into the chest cavity between ribs. Sometimes the needle would block up with a piece of meat. So a 3-way valve was opened, allowing fine wire to clear the needle. The valve between the water bottle and air bottle was opened to allow water to flow into the air bottle to slightly pressurise it. This would collapse the lung, letting it rest and recover. This happened every couple of days initially, and was later extended to every 5 days after about a year. After a year, I was pronounced negative to TB, although the treatment continued for another 4 years. I was discharged in 15th of August 1947 as unfit for further service. During my time in service, I enlisted as an aircraftsman, rose through the ranks to leading aircraftsman, and on finishing number 4 SFTS at Geraldton in 1944, was promoted to sergeant. 6 months later, I was promoted to flight sergeant, and a year after that to the rank of warrant officer. The rank of warrant officer was the best of the lot, all care and no responsibility. There were no boring administration duties or guard duties for that rank. As far as I know, I was never shot at, but was awarded the Pacific Star Medal 1939-1945, the Australian War Service Medal, and Return from Active Service badge. One of my schoolmates was selected for aircrew just before me. He was later sent to England and was sent on operation, but was lost in action. I guess I was one of the lucky ones.